The backup quarterback. A very important piece of a football team, yet expendable. However, there are only two reasons why they are the backup quarterback. 1. They simply aren't good enough to be the starter, and their primary job is to be mediocre until the starter returns. Number 2, they're early in their career and the team that drafted them wants them to sit and learn behind the starter until they're deemed ready to be thrown into the starting lineup. Now, the NFL has seen some pretty decent backup quarterbacks over the years. You have your backups that have taken advantage of an opportunity and changed their lives. You have backups that were once starters and jump in and win a Super Bowl. And then you have backups that are simply just backups. But that is just a short list and more modern. In today's video, we're going to dive into some of the greatest backup quarterbacks of all time that you may have never heard of. Let's get right into it. I'm going to be giving you my top 3 greatest backup quarterbacks of all time, starting at number 3. But before we get into that, here are 2 honorable mentions that will not be on my list. The first honorable mention is Shaun Hill. He played in the NFL as a backup journeyman for 15 years, backing up guys like Trent Dilfer, Matthew Stafford, and Sam Bradford. Hill posted a 17-18 record as a backup, throwing 49 touchdowns and 30 interceptions. Honorable mention number 2 is Jeff Hostetler. Now, a lot of people may forget about Jeff, but he played a crucial role for the New York Giants in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Especially in 1990, filling in for Phil Simms, going 3-0 late in the season to give the Giants a first-round bye. Jeff would play the entire postseason in place of Phil Simms, who was injured, and would lead the New York Giants to their second Super Bowl in franchise history. As a backup in New York, Jeff posted a 16-9 record. Now moving on to my third greatest backup quarterback of all time, Nick Foles. Now, a quick pause here. I was going back and forth between a couple of quarterbacks on who to put on this third slot. And just a reminder that this is my list. Now at first you may be thinking, what planet does this guy live on? But Foles unfortunately was not good as a starter aside from that one season in 2013 where he threw 27 touchdowns to only 2 interceptions. Foles was not successful as a full-time starter. After a couple of injuries, poor play, and getting benched, Foles contemplated retirement. However, he ended up signing with the Chiefs in 2016, and this would begin his journey as a backup. Foles would go 2-0 as a backup and would then sign a 2-year deal with the Eagles. And well, you know the story from here. Leading MVP candidate Carson Wentz would tear his ACL week 14, ruling him out for the rest of the season. Foles would step in and lead the Eagles to a first-round bye, and well, the rest is history.
You want Philly?
Yeah, let's do it.
This play is cemented in NFL history, and without Nick Foles, the Eagles would have not won that Super Bowl. The following season in 2018, Foles went 4-1 in the regular season, backing up Carson Wentz, and would once again lead the Eagles to the playoffs as Wentz suffered another injury. Foles would advance to the divisional round before losing to the Saints in a heartbreaking loss. From 2016 to 2018, Foles posted a 13-2 record as a backup, including a 4-1 record in the postseason, along with a Super Bowl championship and a Super Bowl MVP. Overall, Foles posted a 17-9 record as a backup, which is honestly really good. Ironically enough, Foles has the least amount of Super Bowl rings on this list. So let's move on to number 2, Jim Plunkett. Taken number 1 overall in the 1971 NFL Draft, Plunkett was described as, quote, the best pro quarterback prospect I've ever seen. However, the beginning of his career was not the best. His first 7 seasons in the NFL were a nightmare, with only 1 winning season out of 7 and throwing more interceptions than touchdowns. 6 out of those 7 seasons, Plunkett would join the Oakland Raiders and began his journey as a backup quarterback. His first season with the Raiders, he didn't see any playing time, but his second season in 1980 was a different story. Week 5, Plunkett would take over as a starter when Dan Pastorini went down with a fractured leg. Plunkett would finish out the regular season going 9-2 and clinching a spot in the playoffs. He would then lead the Oakland Raiders to their first Super Bowl in franchise history while also being named Super Bowl MVP. The following 2 seasons, Plunkett would be the starter, which would lead him to getting benched again and then leading his team to a divisional round loss. However, 1983 is where Plunkett showed up again. Starting off as a starter, he would lead the Raiders to a 5-2 record before getting benched once again due to poor performance, throwing more interceptions than touchdowns. The football gods then decided to throw him another bone. Starter Mark Wilson went down due to injury, and Plunkett took advantage of this opportunity. He would lead the Raiders once again to a second Super Bowl victory, going 9-1 and this time throwing more touchdowns than interceptions. From getting drafted number 1 overall to getting benched multiple times to winning 2 Super Bowls, coming in as a backup, Plunkett is one of the greatest backups this game will ever see. Specifically as a backup, and this does not include when he started the season as a starter, Plunkett has a record of 23-11, 2 Super Bowl championships, and a Super Bowl MVP. What a run for a backup. Moving on to the greatest backup quarterback of all time, Earl Morrall. Now, Earl Morrall might be new to you if you aren't too invested in the NFL's history, but Earl is undoubtedly one of the greatest backup quarterbacks of all time. He played 21 seasons in the NFL, but he didn't begin his backup journey until he was 10 years into his career. At first he wasn't successful, going 1-5 as a backup for the Giants and hardly saw any playing time. He was then traded for the Baltimore Colts, where he filled in for an injured Johnny Unitas in 1968. Earl would lead the Colts to a 13-1 regular season record where they would win the NFL championship. They would then lose Super Bowl III to the New York Giants and Broadway Joe, but nonetheless a great season. Earl would win the NFL's Most Valuable Player Award, the NFL Championship, a Super Bowl loss, and a 15-2 record. Not bad for a backup quarterback. Then in 1970, he would appear in 3 regular season games, going 2-1 as a backup. The Colts would then find themselves back in the Super Bowl against the Dallas Cowboys, and Johnny Unitas would suffer an injury late in the game. Down 13-6, Earl would go into the game and lead the Colts to a comeback victory, winning Super Bowl V. The following season, Earl would start 9 games, going 7-2 as a starter before resuming his role as a backup. Then in 1972, Earl would be moved to the Miami Dolphins, where he was the backup to Bob Grease. The Dolphins would start the season 4-0 before Bob Grease would suffer a broken leg and a dislocated ankle. What people fail to remember about the Miami Dolphins' perfect season is that Bob Grease wasn't there for a majority of the season. Earl would take over as a starter, going 11-0, leading the Dolphins to the AFC Championship game before getting benched for Bob Grease. The Dolphins would win the Super Bowl, becoming the only team in NFL history to go undefeated. The Dolphins would repeat the following year, and Earl saw less playing time as Bob Grease stayed healthy. Earl played crucial roles in several different situations where teams needed him to step up, and he did. 3 Super Bowl championships, an NFL championship, NFL MVP, 2 first-team All-Pros, and he went 43-11-2 as a backup quarterback from 1966 until 1976. Again, only as a backup quarterback. But I went through his entire game log and looked at games where he started and came in for an injury. That is what his record includes, in case you were curious. Nonetheless, a fantastic career and an all-time great, making him the greatest backup quarterback the NFL has ever seen. Hopefully you all enjoyed. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and as always, I will see you all next video.